pleasure to introduce to you Congressman Michael Grimm. Thank you for coming. I wanted to give you something for your office. Now, 2 years ago, I was driving at a flea market, and I said, you know, I'm the president of the club. I know one day I'm going to meet Congressman Grimm, and he's going to be at our meeting, and I was like, I think this is pretty cool for your office. And it's an old sign. Now, don't touch it too much, it might get wow. This is, Grimm Road. This is from upstate New York. Great. And this is from, they said near Reservoir. I'm not sure which reservoir it was. So you might have, I guess, family upstate New York, maybe? I might. The Grimm name. And they haven't called me for money, so probably not. Either that or they're wealthy. And they don't want to hear from me. See, this is an old sign. It said probably somewhere from the 1940s or so. Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's do that. Thank you very much. So, without further ado, I'm going to have our executive director, John Thomas. He's going to be the moderator of our question and answer section. Okay. Okay. And we want to start it off with how you're going to do with your race coming up. Great. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you for doing what you do. First of all, the reality is that our republic is fragile, and this republic, this wonderful thing that we have, the liberties and freedoms that this country provides, they don't happen by accident. They happen because people like you get involved. So I want to first say thank you for doing that. It means you're all patriots. It means you love your country and your community. And I think we share a lot of values together. That's first and foremost. Secondly, I want to thank you for having me. I know it's slim pickings at the federal level since I'm the only federally elected Republican in all of New York City. Wow, I didn't know that. Yes, I'm the only federally elected Republican for 8.5 million people. And that means that together we have work to do. It can be done. I'm living proof that we can elect Republicans here in one of the most liberal cities in the country. But it takes work. It takes work. And that means the work that often people don't want to do. It's not glorious, it's not even fun sometimes. It's hard work, but it has to be done. When I first ran, going back now to 2009-10 for the 11 election, I had to stand in subways handing people a palm card, literally people saying, "Who are you?" and throwing it on the floor. It's embarrassing and it's humiliating. I knocked on doors and people slammed the doors in my face. I was spat at. You were spat at. Okay? This is the reality. It's not easy. This is a tough city. And if someone doesn't know you, you know, they're often standoffish. Again, it's a tough city. But those are the things we need to do. Registration drives, spread the word. We need to knock on doors. We need to stand in parking lots of ShopRites and other supermarkets like I did, and just introduce yourself and introduce people to the Republican Party. We have a couple of challenges as Republicans. First and foremost, our branding. And I'm trying to work on this at the highest levels with my leadership. And they want to focus on message, but I think we have a branding problem. When you speak to especially younger people, you speak to especially young females, they don't really truly understand what I see here in front of me. A very diverse group, different races, different genders, different age groups. That's who the Republican Party really is. But the Democrats have done a good job of branding us as the white rich elite. And that's just not true. But as long as we have that stigma attached, less people will listen to our message. If they don't listen to the message, then it's irrelevant what your message is, in my opinion. If someone's not listening at all, it doesn't matter how good or how bad your message is. So we've got to focus on our brand, and the way we do that is right here. A diverse group speaking to many others and explaining to them why you're a Republican. I mean, it's not that hard to figure out why we're Republicans. I think all of us agree that we need to have a government that is not out of control and completely bloated and actually listens to the people that voted them in. We need a more a smaller, more coherent, more concise government that lives within its means, for starters. That's just a simple basic that I bet you all of you do in your households and in your own businesses, living within our means. So a smaller, more efficient, more accountable government that lives within its means would be a basic start. And if we could do that, do you know that probably 80% of the challenges we're facing, we'd overcome them just by having some basic principles of prudence when it comes to our fiscal policy? The other thing is, we know we live in a dangerous world. That's obvious. The Middle East is on fire in many ways. And our foreign policy right now is one of complete appeasement. We don't have a foreign policy other than to appease. That's just dangerous. So no matter how much we focus on our domestic policies, and even if we get them all right, like energy independence, for example, and financial responsibility, and real education reform, if we were able to do all of that, it could all be for naught if our enemies feel emboldened and want to strike us down. So there has to be a balance between getting our act together domestically, focusing on what needs to be done in our own housekeeping, as well as keeping a strong leadership role throughout the nation, throughout the world, because we're a nation that everyone looks to. We are still that beacon of hope, but right now, that's in jeopardy. And I think most of the things we hold value, that we really believe in, our moral compass, is all in jeopardy. We have a very, very large undercurrent of not what Democrats used to be traditional Democrats. It's gone way beyond that. There is a liberalism that is much scarier than what a traditional Democrat believes. And this progressive liberal viewpoint is growing, and we see it right here now in our own city. So I am concerned, but as I look out at you, I'm given that same sense of hope that I had when I was in the Marine Corps. That we still have what we need in this country. We still have plenty of patriots that believe that we are the nation of liberty, freedom, and the American dream. And the American dream is not dead. It's not dead. There are some trying to kill it, but it's not dead. And you hitting the streets, going to groups like this, it will make a difference, because it does help elect someone like me. Now, I have a tough race coming up. I have a challenger. He is a very liberal Democrat who has been in the city council for 12 years. His name is Dominic Recchia, and he comes from Brooklyn. But he can raise a lot of money. The liberals are pouring tons of money into him. Nancy Pelosi and her merry band of friends are dumping millions of dollars into him. So the reality is, I'm going to work like I always do. I'm going to work hard. I'm not above knocking on doors. I am not above standing in ShopRite parking lots or any other parking lots. I am not above going to the train station. I am not above going to the bus stops and the express bus stops. I will be doing what we all need to do, which is to spread the word that if we want to keep the community and the country that we were brought up in, if we want to keep what our parents gave us, then it's incumbent upon us to keep some of that tradition going and spread the word that this progressive liberal ideology is dangerous and it undermines everything this country was founded on. So I am very optimistic with my chances. We have strong numbers. I'm a hard worker. I've assembled a good team, but I definitely need volunteers. So if there's anyone here that would like to volunteer to make sure we keep at least one Republican at the federal level in New York City, at least one, and then we need to start working on getting more Republicans elected to office, especially at the federal level. This is where it happens. So I would ask for you to join my team, stand by my side, and let's go out there, let's knock on doors, let's hand out literature, and let's spread the word, and let's make sure people know what Republicans really are, what we stand for, and we're not that demagogue, ideology that the Democrats have smeared us with, but we are actually everyday, average, hard-working people. That we believe that the government is not the answer to everything, and that hard work is what is expected of us. And if you work hard in this country, you can get ahead. But it's not the government that's going to give it to you. It's us that have to make our own. So with that, again, I want to say thank you very, very much for your your commitment to the Republican Party. I want to thank you for coming out on a Sunday night. That shows me how much you care about this country, and it tells me how much you care about the issues, and I appreciate that, and thank you for having me. With that, I was going to say, let's open it up to some questions, and the moderator will
John Thomas. I say you raise your hands before questions. I'm going to kick off with Paul.
Congressman, I want to ask you about an issue that was before Congress about 2 years ago, and I'd like to thank you for voting yes on auditing the Fed, which I think is probably the most important piece of legislation of our time, even if it doesn't get that much press. But what do you think as an individual, and what is the Republican conference in the House doing to check the Federal Reserve and stop them from destroying our economy more than they already have?
Great question. You know, the Federal Reserve has tremendous power because they really can dictate our monetary policy. And the monetary policy that we've had over the last several years is very dangerous. Have you been hearing about QE1 and QE2 and QE3? It's QE stands for qualitative easing. Qualitative easing is printing money. Printing money. So by definition, we're devaluing the value of our currency. As we continue to print money, we're doing this for basically one reason. It's to keep interest rates artificially low, which they've done. So why do they need to keep interest rates artificially low? Because we have record amount of debt. We're facing soon $18 trillion. 18 trillion. Now that's a burden that we're going to saddle our grandchildren. Let's be honest, there's no one in this room that's going to pay it. This is generational debt that's going to be passed on to children, grandchildren, and their children. That's not what this country was ever about. We have never taken the challenges that we faced and passed them on to someone else. We always stood up, and the greatest generation was perfect at this. Our founding fathers, when there was a challenge, they looked it straight in the eye and they went right at it and they took it upon themselves so that they would not have to give it to their children. That's what we've been doing. That's unsustainable, and I think we're 2 or 3 years away from catastrophe if we don't get our debt under control. So the Fed plays a major role in that. Why? Because now they've inflated, QE3 has now printed so much money to keep interest rates low without controlling the debt that as interest rates inevitably have to rise because markets find their level, the rest of the world will put pressure. The interest rates will eventually rise. As those interest rates rise, we will not be able to afford our debt payments. So monetary policy has a tremendous impact on the viability of our future economy. And I think that the Fed has more control and more power than the Congress realizes. And it is incumbent upon the Congress to keep checks and balances. That's the way the Constitution was set up, checks and balances. And we haven't done enough to rein in the Fed, and that's why I voted the way I did to have them audited. You know, there are things that the general public doesn't even know. Most people, the average person out there has no idea what QE1 was, let alone knowing we're on QE3. The average person out there doesn't even understand how large our debt payments are growing. That at some point, as interest rates rise, we won't be able to make the payments. So I do support auditing the Fed, I do support reining in the Fed, but reining in the Fed is only one small portion. The real reality is we have got to get our debt crisis, looming crisis, under control. And there's only one way to do that. We have to deal with the largest cause of the debt, and that's entitlements. And no one has had the political courage at the president level or in the Senate to take that on. Now, you know that Paul Ryan put out a very controversial budget. But the truth is, every single economist I've spoken to, Republican and Democrat, admit if we don't get Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security under control, then we cannot deal with our debt crisis. That's a mathematical fact. This isn't politics. This isn't about ideology. Math doesn't lie. There's only so many things you can do when debt continues to rise. And the truth is, healthcare is the #1 cause of these rising costs. So we needed to fix healthcare. So what did the Democrats do? Instead of fixing it, to bend the cost curve down to make it more affordable because it was spiking for the last 2 decades, the cost of healthcare has been spiking out of control, they made it more expensive. ObamaCare is a train wreck. Let's make no mistake about it, it's a train wreck. The problem is the Democrats have dug dug in so much with it that they're going to ride this train into the ground. Here's the problem with that. Politically, that might sound good for Republicans. But you know what? I care more about this country than I do politics. Much more. And the truth is, I don't care about the political victory. I don't want to see my country going down the tubes, but that's what's happening. This is going to destroy health care as we know it, and it already is. So it's all part of the same thing, reining in the Fed, but I would say we need to rein in almost every major agency out there. The heads of these agencies are out of control, and they no longer listen to Congress. Now, why don't they listen to Congress? It's very simple. Well, that's part of it, because the Democrats in the Senate haven't passed a budget in how long? So when you don't pass a budget, this is what happens. You get a continuing resolution. The way you're supposed to fund the government is 12 appropriations bills. Now, many Congresses didn't do all 12, even when it was Republican. They did 9, they did 10, and then they do a mini bus, and they finish it up, and you get all of your appropriations done, and that's how you fund your government. Why is that important? Because when a head of an agency, whether it's the SEC, whether it's the CFTC, whatever it may be, Health and Human Services, whatever secretary comes before the committee of jurisdiction, if they were disrespectful, if they didn't answer your questions, if they didn't go forward with what they promised to do, you would take away their funding. And that's what they were afraid of, because the power of the purse is really the power of the Congress. But when you don't pass appropriations bills and you only have CRs, you just gave away that power. So what's happened over the last 4 or 5 years is that the heads of these agencies have become emboldened, and they laugh at us at committee. They come in with lawyers that tell them exactly what to say to run out the clock, and they never answer the question and not held accountable, because the only power we really have over them, because they're appointed by the president, is to cut their funding. And they know we don't have that power anymore as long as we don't pass appropriations bills and have a budget. So the joke is on us when we don't pass appropriations. Now, we've been working in the House on appropriations. You know, Speaker Boehner hasn't been as strong as he needs to be on certain issues, but on appropriations, this has been one of his big issues. And it looks like we're finally getting back to the appropriations process and forcing the Senate as best we can to pass appropriations bills to get back to regular order and have budgets. And that will help rein in all of these different agencies, and that's a must, because they're all bloated, they're all out of control, and they're not accountable to the American people.
Next question.
I just want to mention something else. Like you're talking about fiscal issues, and I agree those are extremely important, but also our borders are important. The border's totally out of control now. I think Speaker Boehner, he did a good job so far, in keeping bottled up the amnesty bill that the Senate passed. But now I've heard discussion that they're talking about maybe passing a lighter version of amnesty in individual bills. We should not be passing amnesty at all.
Okay, well, just so you know, I have not heard that any amnesty will be passing whatsoever, and I had a personal conversation with the Speaker and with Eric Cantor, and as far as I know, there's no truth to it, any light amnesty, anything coming to the House floor. So the Senate may be working on stuff, but that's irrelevant, because just like we can't get our fiscally prudent and our more conservative principles passed through the Senate, well, they can't get their very liberal things passed through us on something like that. So my understanding is the House is going to stand firm. There is not going to be any amnesty. The only thing that I heard may come to the floor would be a bill that focuses on border security and possibly E-Verify. That's what I'm hearing right now, is that's the only thing up for negotiations would be a border security with real security. Well, here's the reality. If someone from a foreign country seeking a better life can come across the border without documentation and means us no harm, and they're working underground, they're getting paid cash, that's not good for our economy. I respect that. But if that person can get in, someone that wants to do us harm, someone smuggling a dirty bomb or something like that can also get in. So it is a national security issue. It's not just an immigration issue. It is a national security issue, and for that reason, we must secure our borders once and for all. We have to accept the fact that there are many people in the world that want to do us harm. There are places in this world that want to destroy our entire way of thinking and our life. They want to destroy the Western world. We've seen it. We have to accept that they will come to our land and take human life right here, American lives. They killed ambassadors, 4 dead in Benghazi. By the way, no one held accountable for that. Okay? A 9/11 we've lived through. We don't need another 9/11. We don't need a dirty bomb going off in, God forbid, one of our tunnels or our subways. And if we can't stop someone crossing the border to start a new life, how do we stop someone coming in to do us harm? You can't.
Joshua?